and Dara Puvar. Will you please give them another round of applause? Our next candidate is Mr. Paul Vallas, being interviewed by Ramseen Benjamin, co-founder of Vote Assyrian. Please welcome Mr. Vallas and Ramseen.
I wasn't listening at all. Okay.
We just didn't want to bore you with the same questions over and over again.
You know, I've gone to like 18 of these forums, and it's like the same questions. Only thank you for giving me more than a minute to respond. Thank you so much.
Good evening, all. Good evening, Mr. Vallas. My name is Ramseen Benjamin, and I'm co-founder of Vote Assyrian. We are an organization that is dedicated to voter education, voter registration, and voter engagement within the Assyrian American community of Illinois. Thanks again for joining us tonight. Thank you for running for mayor of the third largest city in the country. And thank you for joining us tonight to meet residents of probably one of the most diverse cities in our country. Please, if you may, take 2 minutes to introduce yourself.
Well, great. My name is Paul Vallas, and I was born in the Rosen-Pullman area, the grandson of Greek-American immigrants. And in my family, there are 6 veterans, 4 police officers, 3 teachers, 1 firefighter, paramedic, soon to be 2. And of course, my wife right now is at TSA, still going to work despite the fact that she's not getting paid. But I am Greek Orthodox by faith, rigidly Greek Orthodox. I still have the same frame glasses that I had when I was in 6th or 7th grade, because the man I admired most next to my father was Father Byron Papa Nicolau, and of course he was my priest for well over 50 years at St. Constantine and Helen. You know, I'm a lifelong public servant. You probably remember me coming in and revitalizing the Chicago public schools, and then running against Rod Blagojevich in the political machine back in 2001. Incidentally, the 4 candidates who courageously entered the race after Rahm Emanuel dropped out, including the one that just spoke, actually didn't endorse me. They endorsed my opponent. But at the end of the day, after Chicago, I went to Philadelphia, where I did similar reforms. After the hurricane all but destroyed New Orleans, I rebuilt the schools in New Orleans. And after the devastating earthquakes in Haiti and in Chile, I went to Haiti and Chile. I've been to Haiti about 50 times. I've also done major education work with the government of Pakistan, and I also spent time in the Sudan. So the point is, I've always viewed my role as that as a public servant. My history is one of taking on monumental problems and addressing the financial challenges that those governmental institutions have faced, but doing it in a way that has enabled those institutions to provide for the type of investments, the type of equitable investments in all of their communities to help revitalize those communities. I am a problem solver, but I am a problem solver who, for me, equity has always been the standard that I've never deviated from. And obviously that's one of the reasons I'm running for the city, for mayor. I think the mayor is in severe financial crisis. And I think at least 80% of the city has been long overdue for serious investment and serious equity in the way we invest our resources. So thank you very much.
Thank you for that introduction, Mr. Vallas. We'll get right into the questions. Question number 1. We are in the midst of families considering a move to the suburbs or even to other states for school, work, and lower cost of living. How will you assure that residents from modest socioeconomic backgrounds can afford to live, work, and play in Chicago?
Well, you know, there's a combination of reasons. People move out of their communities when they feel their communities are unsafe, when they feel their schools are not adequate, when they feel that there are not sufficient economic opportunities, and when they're getting killed by taxes and fees and fines. What I've done is I've laid out a comprehensive plan, and in that comprehensive plan, I've talked about how to stabilize the city finances by in effect, meeting our long-term pension obligations while balancing the budget But balancing the budget in a way so that we could reprioritize our spending so that we were able to invest in public safety, infrastructure, affordable housing, obviously education, and hopefully I'll be able to elaborate a bit more if you ask me specific questions on those topics. But my financial plan also, also includes a strategy for capping property taxes and freezing fees and reducing fines. We have got to ensure that our city is affordable. And what I want to do financially, and you can take a look at my podcast and you can look at what I put online, is to, in effect, lay out a long-term financial plan for the city that will guarantee affordability so that no one's taxes on businesses, on landlords, or for that matter, homeowners will never grow by more than 5% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less, which has been about 1 or 2%. That fees are in effect capped and that you never pay fines that exceed the cost of the fees. So affordability is a critical component.
We might have a little bit of time for a follow-up question.
Okay.
How will the city protect tenants' rights from rising rent and abusive landlords?
Well, first of all, the city has to enforce laws. I mean, they've got to make sure that housing, that all people have access to housing. They've got to make sure that individuals who receive housing vouchers can use those vouchers and housing subsidies anywhere that's most appropriate. I mean, the city has to make sure that there is, in effect, no discrimination. But ultimately, if you are going to control rents, if you've got to cap property taxes. You've got to, the most effective way to deal with gentrification is basically two things. One is expand affordable housing. Two is to cap property taxes. Let's talk about the first. What I've laid out in my affordable housing plan is to remove the obstacles to expand affordable housing. Let me just tell you 3 things that you can do, which wouldn't cost any money. By getting rid of aldermanic privilege and allowing homeowners or apartment owners, whatever, to convert unimproved space to garden units, you could create 150,000 affordable units in the next 3 or 4 years without a single taxpayer subsidy, not a dime. Secondly, if you took the 40 to 50,000 properties that are unoccupied and you turn those properties over to community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, not-for-profits, and you provided them with property improvement grants so that they could, in effect, prepare those properties to be reoccupied, you could bring tens of thousands of units into the community, into every community. You know, the garden units alone in Maldonado's ward, 2,600 potential garden units. And then the third thing is you go in and you cap property taxes. If you freeze property taxes, your rents are not going to go up. And I'm just not talking about freezing property taxes. I'm talking about freezing water, the cost of water, the cost of sewage, because for a lot of these apartment dwellers, or for a lot of the landlords, what's driving their rents up is property taxes second, but actually water rates first. So those 3 things will change the dynamic. It'll expand the amount of affordable housing available dramatically, and the second thing it'll do is it'll cap the ever-increasing costs to not only homeowners, businesses, but also landlords.
Thank you for that elaboration, Mr. Vallas. We'll move right into the second question, which is, data shows that immigrants and refugees are more likely, than the typical citizen to start businesses and be entrepreneurs. Does your neighborhood economic development plan include lightening regulation or reducing taxes for small business owners? What is your plan to further support small business owners, particularly among immigrant populations?
Well, let me take that question first, but I would love to answer, to also respond to a question concerning the overall strategy that needs to be embraced, because 80% of our city has seen little to no investment. And in many of these communities, the only investment that you see is investments by the sons and daughters of people who are immigrants. Like when my grandfather came to Roseland and opened up his little grocery store on the corner of 113th and 111th, and it was called South Park, but now it's called Martin Luther King Drive. So the bottom line is we've got to create conditions in order to support our small businesses. What that means is we not only have to cap property tax fees and fines, but what we've also got to do is we've got to reduce these these burdensome business taxes and fees and fines, the cost that you pay for inspections, just the cost of just being there that are simply strangling businesses. And what I'd like to do to businesses, for businesses that are actually on the borders with suburban communities, or for that matter, on the border with Indiana, is I'd like to go in and I'd like to look at doing tax abatements so that you can, in effect, reduce your taxes or rebate a portion of your sales taxes, if not all your sales taxes, paid to the city, so that you can begin to level the playing field with the surrounding areas. So at the end of the day, we have got to recognize that we can't simply nickel and dime our small businesses to death. So providing them with the support they need, but more importantly, capping the taxes and capping the fees and capping the fines and going in and simply not, and because you see it, they come in, you don't mow your lawn, they ticket you, they get you on 18 different inspection violations, they ticket you, and then if you're late in paying, they fine you, and it's over and over again. And they're doing it not to improve the quality of the business services you're providing. I really think they're doing it like the red light cameras. They're doing it to generate revenue. The red light cameras were never designed for safety purposes. They were designed as a revenue generator.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Vallas. We'll move into the next question, which is very much of importance to a lot of the partnering organizations here. Solely based on the color of their skin, their place of birth, and/or their faith, communities are targeted and criminalized by national security surveillance, such as the Countering Violent Extremism, CVE program. Under the current administration, CVE focuses on the Muslim community as its primary target, but also targets activist groups like Black Lives Matter or LGBTQIA. Community spaces such as schools and places of worship will become unsafe given the fear that staff and community members trained as unofficial informants will employ unfounded and biased methods to determine who is at risk to become or already is a radicalized extremist or terrorist. What is your stance on CVE and the mistrust it creates in our city?
Well, I have mistrust for ICE and I have mistrust for CVE. So at the end of the day, what they're doing is unacceptable. It's simply unacceptable. Look, we live in a day and age where we've got to be security conscious. But at the end of the day, I think there's a balance. There's a balance between providing for security, real security, and not discriminating against people of color, people of faith, etc. So at the end of the day, I don't see, I will be basically an advocate for ensuring that the federal government knows its boundaries, and if that means there are areas where we will not cooperate or not allow them to engage in certain practices, we will do that. I mean, we will be open to exchanging information and to cooperating on issues that we consider to be legitimate issues of security, but at the end of the day, we have to set standards, and it's incumbent upon the mayor's office to do that and to draw that line in the sand, so to speak.
Just as a quick follow-up, would your administration truly uphold our sanctuary city designation and make sure that our community can live and pray in safety without fear of government surveillance by refusing to cooperate with CVE programs through all city agencies such as CPD, CPS, etc.?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm the grandson of Greek American immigrants. It's my wife is the granddaughter of Dutch immigrants, and we still have 3 generations in both our houses. Believe it or not, as old as I am, my mom and dad are still living together alone, which is scary. Which means we get the occasional call and we have to go over to the house. But at the end of the day, this is I am a product of the community, just 1 generation removed. So you will always have a strong advocate on issues of immigration. I embrace the welcoming city, the sanctuary city law. Look, if you have somebody in the community that's preying on the community, that's preying on the immigrant community, who has a felony background, a documented felony background, then obviously you have to take appropriate action. But the bottom line is we need to embrace and support and strengthen the sanctuary city law and be a welcoming city.
Thank you for that, Mr. Vallas. We got about 1.5 minutes left, so I want to get into this question. A significant number of Chicago public school students are from families of color and immigrant families. How will you increase support for neighborhood public schools? Do you support an indefinite moratorium on charters? Do you think it's best to have an elected board, appointed board, or a hybrid board? Please take a minute or so to answer
Well, that's
question.
a lot in 1.5 minutes. Okay,
Sorry.
All right, so I may forget, I'm older than you, so I may forget some of the questions. First of all, when it comes to a board, look, I support a hybrid board, but I support appointing board members who are elected local school council members. So I want to pick among the elected local school councils, because the danger of having an open elected board is you'll get the result that they had in LA, where the charter spent $15 million and they elected a charter-dominated board. So I would pick from among the local school councils to staff the board. That's the first thing. Look, you know, in terms of education and improving our schools, I took over the schools in 1995 when they had a $1.4 billion structural deficit and they had lost 110,000 students. 6 years later, they had 6 balanced budgets, $1 billion in cash balances, 78 new school buildings, and 350 renovated buildings, 70,000 more students than they have today, and I had not closed a single school. And we had prayer clubs, we had Bible classes, we had prayer rooms, we had after-school extended day programs, summer school programs. We provided school-based community services, including healthcare services. We had the diversity calendar. You know, we had the Good Samaritan programs. We had values and character education. That's the system we created. That's why the system for the 6 years that I was there grew in enrollment. The only time in 4 decades that this system has seen a growth in enrollment. Those are the skills I bring to the table. So I will return to the practices that grew this district, and that created conditions for the district to have moved significantly further had the policies that I had implemented and that I was hoping to sustain when I ran for governor, had those programs been sustained. But it's not going to be hard to return the school district to the strategies that produce that type of growth and prosperity.
Thank you so much, Mr. Vallas. We look forward to hearing you later on in your closing statements. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Vallas, and Ramseen, would you please give them another round of applause? At this time, we want to take just a couple of minutes and introduce some of the elected officials that have joined us tonight. We have 50th Ward Alderman, Mrs. Silverstein, Deborah Silverstein.